is doing some super awesome things in the industry. And so I'm really excited to introduce Jordan, who is the director of design director at Fearless. And I'd love to hear more from Jordan about what that means and what Fearless does overall.
Great. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, everybody. It's such a privilege to have a chance to talk to you all today. So I'm going to say just a little bit about what I do, my role at Fearless, and a little bit about the type of design that we practice, and before we go into the tour of our space. So I'm Jordan Watts. I'm the director of design. I set the vision for our design practice, and so our design practice includes everything from product design, service design, and content design, so content and content strategy. And so, like Kim said, we are a digital services firm, and so most of our clients are government clients, and so our design work, it's all about trying to make government services work better for people. And so our main focus is on building more inclusive software, creating content that is plain and easy to understand, and then ultimately like redesigning government services so that they provide more value to the public. And so happy to talk about all of this and to answer any of your questions in further detail, but I want to pause now and turn it back to Kim and the folks to give us a little tour of our space, because we've got some videos lined up for you.
Thanks. Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and share, and we're going to watch 2 quick videos that are really well done and give better view of the space than we could by walking around with a laptop. So yeah, and then again, we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. So, you know, as you're watching, if you have any questions that come up, feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll be sure to ask them.
The Fearless headquarters was designed to serve our culture, our community, and our customers. We created the environment to encourage productivity and collaboration, but still allow flexibility for the many different ways that our members and teams work. We also wanted our space to build up our community. We designed common areas and meeting rooms to be flexible to host everything from student tours to tech meetups. Hi, I'm Bethany Haltman, Director of Brand and Communications at Fearless. I've guided the design of each of our space expansions throughout the years, and I'm always trying to better understand how our people and teams best work. At our headquarters in Baltimore, we recently expanded to over 7,000 square feet of office space and gave a lot of purposeful thought to how this space could work for us. It was important for us to create different environments for team members to use throughout the workday. The space is built upon team rooms for each of our Scrum project teams, which typically have TVs to share screens or video conference those not in the room. Each team member has an automated sit-stand desk to allow them to change posture throughout the day. They can also borrow an exercise ball chair or reserve a treadmill hot desk if they want to get their steps in. All team members have a laptop so they can move around the office to work. We have private office stalls with a desk and monitor for anyone needing a quiet space to take a phone call or dive uninterrupted into the code base. The lounge also allows for conversations or a change of scenery with sofa booths, tables for lunch or games, and beanbags when it's just that kind of day. Family is important to us. We've always had space for kids to join, but now we also have a calf lounge set aside for them with couches, toys, playpen, TV, and fridge. We've had babies take naps in here and school kids watch their favorite show or do craft projects. When it's not in use, team members also use this lounge for quick meetings or a quiet space. Our meeting spaces are flexible to accommodate various meeting sizes, with a garage door connecting 2 smaller teams. Teams often reserve dedicated meeting space for Scrum ceremonies or customer meetings. The design of our space is intentionally open, transparent, and adaptable, much like how we try to run our company. The space is branded Fearless, with touches of purple everywhere and reminders of our values and our people on the walls. Our large Fearless sign also serves as a backdrop to our photo booth, which is a guest book of sorts to commemorate visitors and events. Our new space has allowed for a lot of collaboration, innovation, and fun. We love working together, and we appreciate that our offices allow for a wide range of environments and ways to work at our best.
All right, and we have one more. And again, just in case anyone joined in the meantime, feel free to put any questions in the chat. Jordan, I don't know if you have any anything you wanted to say before this one?
Oh, no, I'm just having so much fun watching this space and also just seeing like so many
Yeah.
folks in the space because yeah, obviously it's the pandemic, the office isn't as full, so it's just bringing back all sorts of warm memories.
Warm, yes.
This is great.
One day it'll be back.
Yeah.
Hopefully next year we can bring all of you to Fearless at
Oh.
Spark, do this in person.
Love that.
Cool. Yeah. All right. Thanks again for sharing those. Obviously, we're going to talk a little more about, the obvious that you may not have been using the office as much lately. So we'll talk about all that. So yeah, I'm going to pass it over to Kim again.
Awesome. Well, I guess first I just want to open up the conversation to anyone who's here. If you want to drop questions in the chat, we will certainly reach out. This is casual. So also, if you have a question and you want to engage, please take yourself off mute and we can chat. I guess to start with, we'd love to hear, Jordan, like, what are you working on currently? What are some things that are on the docket for you all right now? What are the typical types of projects that Fearless is working on?
Yeah, great question. So my work is a little bit different than the work that most designers do because a lot of what I'm doing is very strategic, like forward thinking. So a lot of what I'm doing right now is like planning for next year, kind of thinking about like how we grow strategically. But our work is spread across, at the very least, like 10 different federal agencies. And so depending on the different priorities and the services, it might be a little bit different. So for example, we have designers working at the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. And what they're doing is they're trying to help CMS design their IT services in a more human-centered way. And so a lot of that's like coaching, some of it's like product design and things like that. And then over in the federal services space, we are helping to make login.gov more secure. And so login.gov is like very, very important like login software that's in use by the federal government and it's offered to like state and local governments. And so, depending on like which part of government we're working in, we're either trying to help them deliver better services or trying to change the way that they work. So at a very high level, that's generally what we're working on.
Those are huge, super important projects that so many people in the country and beyond touch. And we have a question in the chat that I think kind of relates to that. So it says, in federal work or government, in terms of making sites more accessible, do you have clearance to do this work? Also, do you have any recommendations on learning more about accessibility for the web and design in general? So I'm assuming you have clearance, but maybe if you could talk a little bit about like the technicalities behind that, since you are doing so many different types of things. And then, like who's responsible for those pieces?
Yeah, absolutely. So So many good questions in there. Let me speak to the clearance question first, because I think that's a little bit more straightforward. So different agencies have different types of clearances, and so we started off in the defense intelligence space, and so for that kind of work, we were working with very, very sensitive data that could get people killed. And so that would require like the highest level of clearance. But most of our work doesn't require a clearance at that level. At the very most, it requires like a public trust. And so generally what you do is, it's a process that's managed by the agency. You submit, some information about yourself. There's a whole like background investigation process that the agency provides, and it's sort of handled in that way. But so I would say that's like a very, very small part of our lives, but it does obviously impact the work that we do. But as far as like the accessibility question, this is one of my favorite topics because it touches on an aspect of design that's very important to me, and that's inclusive design. And this is particularly important when you're designing public services, but really when you're designing anything, right? Because public products and services are only as good as they are accessible. And
Right.
in my mind, like accessibility and usability are really the same thing. It's just about like who are you making this product usable, for, right? Or like who can use this product. And so for our federal clients, they're all bound by something called Section 508. So there are very, very strict standards about, like, for example, color contrast, like, the amount of contrast that you can have between text and background colors and things like that. Or, when it comes to interaction design, this is something that I see all the time. You go to like a homepage and you see like a really cool, like, I don't know, like auto, like motion graphic, like splash, sort of like splash section, things like that, which they seem like very intuitive and very like engaging, are not always like, accessible. Like, so we can think about like different types of accessibility, people who are using assistive technology to access like websites, or people who need assistance to like navigate from like place to place. And so like Section 508 is like one of the ways in which we can kind of like go through a checklist to make sure that what we're designing is accessible. But it doesn't really stop there. Like a lot of it is based off of like usability testing. We've partnered with the National Federation of the Blind in the past, so that way we can like recruit from their pool of users to understand, is what we're designing actually usable by someone who's using a screen reader or who cannot see the page and things like that. And so for us, it's like an ongoing conversation. Like Section 508 is like one good resource. There's a lot. If you're on Twitter, there's a whole like, it's called the Ally community. It's A11Y that you can find. Like, there's lots of really good research out there on accessibility best practices. And over the last like few months, we've even had like an inclusive design book club at Fearless, where we're reading a book called Mismatch. It's called Mismatch, and it's by Kat Holmes, and it's all about kind of thinking in inclusive terms, changing your behaviors to be more inclusive, and some like really good best practices for designing for inclusivity. So it's a really, really big topic. I could talk at length about this. This is one of my favorite topics. Yeah, I'll stop there.
No, that's so cool. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thanks for sharing the resource. So you're super passionate about this. Fearless, this is like clearly a value that Fearless really holds at its heart. Would love to hear more about like your personal journey and how you got to Fearless, and like how, like who you are and how you wound up doing this type of work.
Sure. Yeah. Well, yeah, so I think like a lot of folks in design, particularly in UX design or product design, I had kind of a non-traditional path. And so I studied film in college, and I was really interested in, filmmaking and film theory. And I really wanted to make movies and work on projects that had a social impact. And so that was something that was like very, very near and dear to my heart. And so after college, obviously it's very difficult to get a job in film.
To be a filmmaker.
Yeah, so I started working at the Maryland Office of Tourism Development in their digital services department.
Cool.
And I made some connections there that, eventually took me to the National Aquarium. So I worked on their digital
Oh,
services
cool.
for several years. And so that's where I really cut my teeth on everything from, designing native applications to designing websites, content strategy. That's where I first learned about this whole discipline of user experience design. And, sort of from that, I kind of got my bearings on what I wanted to do and found Fearless. And that's the rest is, I guess, history, as you might say.
That's super awesome. So I'm gonna ask one more question and then we can jump into another topic. But I think that like Fearless from the outside, and I think from the inside as well, Fearless seems as though they're doing things really differently, or at least being really intentional about what design means, first of all, who is considered a designer, who we're serving, but then also what work culture looks like, how you cultivate an inclusive work culture from the inside. And so again, really big, super big topics. Maybe we can start like outside in, and then we can talk a little bit more about like work culture and what it's like day to day at Fearless. So you guys are doing really cool stuff to ensure that that folks who are not typically considered designers can consider themselves designers, and how we view the field in general. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Maybe some programming that you guys have been doing? I mean, you guys have been doing such cool stuff around that recently.
Yeah, this is such a good question.
Sorry, I
hope I can do this justice. But here's just fundamentally how I kind of look at design. So, I think a common misconception about design is that it's like a purely like a visual discipline, and for me, like at the root, design is about trying to understand and like gain a shared understanding of like a problem, and generally like a person's problem. That's like the whole human-centered design perspective, is trying to understand problems in the sense of like of human terms. And so that's the first activity, is just kind of like defining what a problem is. And so the problem might be, nobody can use this website because it's unusable, or it might be that I can't hold this pad of, or I can't like effectively like pull this sticky note, right? And so like that's one part of the design process. The second part of the design process is about creating a shared understanding of like what the future could be. So right, it's like creating a mock-up of that next stage for the website where now it is usable, or creating a rendering of like an alternate like sticky note pad. And so like that's like fundamentally for me what design is. And so when I think about like who is a design practitioner, I'll give you just a quick, very, very quick example. One of the projects that we're working on at the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, the goal is to make data sharing easier. And so that if you are a Medicare beneficiary, so this is someone who is of like generally of like retirement age, of a fixed income, and you're receiving benefits from the government to pay for your health insurance. If you go to the doctor, your doctor doesn't always know your complete medical history because of just their systems don't always talk to one another. And so what we're trying to do is, if you go to the doctor, we want to make it easier for the doctors to see your full complete medical history, because the theory is that this will result in like better patient outcomes, right? And so it's very, very, very technical, and it's like involving like software that's like connecting to different software. And in my mind, like that's a design problem, right? And so you might be someone who's designing like the interface that people use, or you might be the person who's designing sort of the process of how different data transform, and that's a design problem. And so that's often how we talk about design is, you don't have to be a designer you don't have to have design in your title to be a designer, as long as what you're doing is trying to understand and help people understand what a problem is. And if you're trying to help them understand like what the solution can be, that's design. But so I think that's one part of it. The other thing I would say is that, and this is particularly important when we talk about inclusivity, is like who is at the table, like who is informing design, right? And so like this is I'm in one of my favorite spots in the office. It's our large conference room, and you can see around. I think you got a better view in like in the videos. You can see a mural, and the children on the mural, they're based off of the children of our founders, Delali Drasa and John Foster. And so, their goal, in one of the North Stars kind of guiding the evolution of this company, is that we want folks who have been structurally and historically alienated and prevented from joining this industry, to have a place and to see themselves in this industry, because, and this is particularly important in when you're designing government software or public services, because the people who are using these services are diverse, and there's a very broad spectrum of human experience. And so if the people who are making these decisions only come from one background, only one gender identity, like only one race, you're only representing one sort of decision, you're only representing one sort of like lived experience. And so I think that's,
and you can do the best you can, but like there are limitations and biases that just like inherently exist.
Yeah, and so I think it's particularly important for us. This is why we talk about inclusivity in such a deliberate way, but it's tied into even how we like recruit in staff for projects, because we believe like a more representative team is able to design more effectively. So anyway, I can talk about this for hours.
This is like super important that the design community continues to have these conversations and is very strategic and intentional about doing this work. Like it has to be on the forefront. It cannot be like on the back burner or like a side kind of, oh, by the way. So I think that segues into the next question that I want to ask about your internship program. You have an internship program, right, at Fearless, which I think is really cool. I'd love to hear you talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. We just went through about a month and a half ago, we just ended our first pilot of our internship program. And so each one of our practices and some of our like administrative functions, they each had an intern. So for example, we had a design intern, engineering interns, and things like that. And I think the traditional internship experience is where you are generally doing like busy work, or you're doing the work that no one else wanted to do. And so we were very, very intentional about crafting an experience where interns would be exposed to the type of work that they would do if they were working at Fearless or another digital services company. And so that involved like apprenticeships and shadowing like current employees. That involved like being involved in like planning sessions, so involving interns in like planning work that teams were doing, and even sometimes taking on work themselves. And so the whole goal was, how can we through this experience prepare our folks for future employment at Fearless or any digital services company.
So for folks who are maybe interested in that program that are on this call, how can they apply? What is your application cycle? Who do you look for? Who's the ideal candidate?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you go to fearless.tech/careers, I think there might be an internship opening listing right now. If there's not, there's always a pitch your position opening, and feel free to pitch an internship position, because we're looking for candidates for the next cohort.
Awesome. So as we shift kind of the way we think about design, community, service, population, the industry in general, I think that internally these firms and the way that designers work have to shift. And so we saw in the video that internal space at Fearless, creating a culture that is comfortable, that is supportive of families, that is supportive of non-traditional families, is really important. Can you talk more about that? What it feels like to work at Fearless, and maybe, I think in general, how maybe other firms or agencies can model these things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or how you can model these things for other firms.
Yeah. So if you walk through Fearless, through our headquarters, so we have an office in Baltimore, we have an office in Montgomery. I'm in our Baltimore headquarters, and you'll see examples of our values like all across the office. And so, for example, take initiative, create belonging, open dialogue. And so we're just constantly reminding folks of like, here are the values that bring us all together, and these are how we would like, here are the behaviors that we aspire to. And so I think starting with examining your values and really reinforcing them as a core kind of like unifying connector is so important. I think I was talking to Delali, our founder, the other week, and we were in this office, and I was just remarking on how much being in this space like really inspires me. And so, he was talking about kind of like a next step for us is to just continue this trend of just showing around the office like who is it we're designing for, and just constantly reminding folks of like the human perspective. I think even if you're in our office, you'll see like it's designed from a human perspective. Like from Bethany's introduction in the video, like we designed like very deliberately this space to be modular, to change over time as people's needs change. So I think like if I could give like any like advice outside of like really starting with your value, it's just knowing that like you have to design things from a human perspective, knowing that like people's needs will change over time, and so there has to be like flexibility in that. So years ago, when Bethany we were very much a smaller company, and Bethany was kind of thinking about like how do we change the space for the next like for the next phase of growth. A really influential book for us was is something called it's a book called Make Space, which was published by the Stanford D School. And so from that, like a lot of like kind of like concepts and theories about like how to design space in a human-centered way. And I think when you do that, you kind of create the conditions for people to exude the values that bring us all together, and to do our shared activities together. So I hope that answers your question. I'm happy to kind of elaborate on that more.
Yeah, no, that's great. How do you feel like Fearless has compared to other jobs that you've had? Like what feels different? And you don't have to, throw anybody or any jobs under the bus, but like what do you like about working there? I mean, you've touched on it, but
Yeah, I think something that's been consistent for me throughout my career is I'm really drawn by the mission of an organization. So when I was working at the National Aquarium, for example, there was a large focus on conservation and conservation effort, and for me, that perfectly aligned with my values. And so something that I appreciate about Fearless is it just touches on the work that we do touches on just about every aspect of I don't know, of public life. And for me, that is like that is a huge motivator. That's something that like gets me up, like wakes me up in the morning, gets me going. But the thing that like sustains me is the people. Like one of our other values is that like people matter. And I don't know if I've ever worked at a company where we really put that, like where we really put that value to like practice in the same way that Fearless does. Like, I don't know if I've worked at a company where like folks genuinely like enjoy being around each other as much as folks do at Fearless. Like, for example, tonight we've organized a like drive-in movie night. So just after work, we're all just gonna meet up and watch some movies at a drive-in. And so like that, whether it's that or like our annual like summer picnics or our like annual holiday parties, people just like being together. And I think when you have like the right mission and like a sort of a supportive community around you, it really makes the work like meaningful, but also like just makes the work easier. So
it's like an easy thing to say that you care about, and because our culture is not set up in that way, it becomes really hard to put into practice. And so you really have to do like deconstruction around these things all the time, and constantly question like, why are we doing things this way? Does this really align with our values? You have to be in like constant reassessment all the time, and that's not always easy to do. It has to come from the leadership and at the root system of the organization.
Yep, totally agree. Like, it's one thing for us to say that we have that we promote community,
Right.
like people like reaching out and like being involved in their communities. It's another thing to make that possible. So like, for example, our leadership don't know, maybe like 2 years ago, created an entire budget for community hours. And so everyone at Fearless is dedicated, is guaranteed at least 10 hours that they can bill to the company to do
cool.
peer work. And that might be
awesome.
tech related. So like there are folks who've, with that time, they've built applications for nonprofits or
That's so cool.
participated in cleanups and things like that. And like that comes from the investment in leadership. So I totally
Yeah.
agree with you.
And that's because leadership at Fearless looks different than it does at other firms. So that starts to really shift stuff. Okay, so I'm going to ask a question in the chat, and then I kind of want to talk about remote life and how you kind of uphold those values remotely. So we've got, can you talk about a past project that defines what separates product design from service design or human-centered design? That's a great question.
Yes, love it. Okay, so, all right. So let's start with human-centered design. So this is something that I think that people often confuse about human-centered design is, or I'll be asked like, we need human-centered design, or like, please do the human-centered design. Like, human-centered design is not necessarily something that you do. It's a perspective. It's a mindset. It's a philosophy. And what it is it's designing with the needs and with the input of people, and particularly the people who are like closest to the problem and closest to the solution. And so for me, that's generally like three types of people. It's the people who are like using a solution. So like, just let's say that, like, thinking about like somebody designed this like pad of sticky notes is like, you might look at me as like one type of user. Another type of person are the people who are like actually building the thing. And so like, there was a whole manufacturing process behind this. And so, good human-centered design like accounts for that. So like, the person who designed this like pad of sticky notes could have said, oh, we're going to make this out of, I don't know, like maple leaves, right? But then the people who actually have to build it, right? That's a decision that's not really like made with them in mind, that kind of thing. And then the third type of person are the people who are like sustaining the product or the service. And so that might be like the business leaders or the product owners and things like that. And so like when you can combine the needs of all of those folks and like really involve them in your process, that's human-centered design. And it really starts from like the perspective. So just say that's human-centered design. But when it comes to services, this is like one of my favorite topics. Like a service is a very like abstract concept, but like at its core, like a service is it's something that helps someone do something, right? So for example, one of our clients is the Small Business Administration, or one of our historic clients is the Small Business Administration, and they provide a number of different public services. So one of the services that they provide is they will certify your business as being small. And so what that does is that helps someone receive different types of benefits. And so that helps someone receive federal loans that are only eligible that are only, or like federally backed loans that are only eligible, that only small businesses are eligible for. It allows them to compete for government contracts that are set aside for small businesses and things like that. And so that is a very, very, very important service that helps people do something. And so that, I would say that's a service. And you can kind of think about like, another way of thinking about a service is it's generally composed of like people, processes, products. And so like services, like, designing services is about like orchestrating those things. It's not about any one of those. It's really about like the balance of those factors. And so if you're the SBA and you're like certifying small businesses, there's a whole process for like applying and like reviewing applicants and things like that. Or there are people who are, who are specialists in this, who are like reviewing the applications and who know, like, are experts in like government policy and regulations and things like that. So that's the service side. And then generally like products, right? It's a thing that you can use, right? So most products provide some sort of service. And so I think that's like the key relationship between like products and services. So for example, one of the, we were developing software for the Small Business Administration that would allow them to more easily process certification requests. And so, that product allowed small business owners to submit their documentation, or it allowed government workers to kind of like review the applications and, kind of have a back and forth with folks to get more information. And so that's just like one small part of like the overall service. It's an important part, right? And so like, when we're talking about like inclusivity and accessibility, that might be like, if that product is not accessible, it might be a barrier of entry to the full service. But like, I would say generally, like you can kind of think about it as, human-centered design is the perspective that we design around. We're always trying to design so that people can receive good services, and that products are like are sort of an avenue to receiving services. So hope that answers your question. This is like one of my absolute like favorite topics. It's also something that we have been over the last 2 years. We've really been investing in growing out our service design capabilities, because we see this as like a very, very important part of changing how government works.
That's so cool. Super brilliant. Thank you so much for
Oh, you're welcome.
sharing all of that. And that's a really great question. So I think it's important to touch on remote life, and especially considering that Fearless has done such an intentional job around creating a community at work. Like, how have you maintained that or evolved that idea of what community looks like online? What is it like working with your coworkers remotely? Are you guys in the office, out of the office? Love to hear more about that.
Yeah, no, great question. So I'm at the moment we're still in our recommended remote phase, and so most people work from home, but it is possible to come into the office, and so we're about to enter in our like optional remote phase. And so I think at that time, I think you're going to see more people coming into the office. But it was a big change for us. Like, I think you saw from the video, like folks at Fearless, we're sharing the space together, we're collaborating. If you're a designer or an engineer, probably likely that like you spend a lot of your day like whiteboarding things together in the same room. And so like some of those activities, obviously you can't do if you're all working from home. And so we had to adapt.
Or do you just use different tools to do that?
A lot of it's tools. I think here's how I kind of look at it, is it's what is the core, like what is like the core, what's at the core of like how you were working, right? And so is it collaboration? Is it like sharing ideas? Is it being able to like work in real time together? Is it communication? And if you can decide those things, you can pick your tool. So like, for example, the other week, our design department, we call it a design herd. Every week we have a design herd meeting, and in the past, that used to be in person. So we would all get together, and if we had a problem that we needed to solve, we would do like a whiteboard activity or some sort of design thinking activity. And so we can't do that now. So anyway, two weeks ago, we were trying to figure out like how could we use this space differently? Like, what are some new ways that we could use this space, or to design sort of like dedicated design rooms? So like you can imagine having like a dedicated like testing suite of like different, I don't know, different devices and things like that, or just like one big, this is my dream, just one big wall of like a whiteboard and post-it notes, things like that. So anyway, and normally we would do that, like we would have like gone through that activity of sort of like brainstorming it together, but 2 weeks ago, instead of doing that, we used Miro. So we used an online, like a remote collaboration tool called Miro, and that allowed us to sort of like get that same kind of effect of being able to like see everyone's work in real time, and put a virtual sticky note on the ideas that we liked, and kind of like all work from the same page. And so we use Miro a lot. Mural is another like common tool that we use. Slack is a communication tool that we'd been using. It was like pretty widely adopted at Fearless beforehand, but that's been a lifesaver. So I think a lot of the modern like collaboration tools have been very, very helpful. Just at a high level, I think it's just important to kind of think about like what kind of value you're getting out of your tools, and then kind of plan around that. So
yeah, I love it. So I could keep asking you questions all day, but I want to just reopen. Maybe we can take like a couple more questions from folks who are here, or any AIGA board members have any questions that we haven't touched on. that we want to talk about before we wrap up?
I'll ask a question. So how ingrained is Slack in Fearless work? Like, is it, you have to have it, or like how much do you use it?
For me personally, and I think that I would venture to say that, like, I think for most folks at Fearless, it is like a critical tool.
Okay.
Like, I will use Slack before I'll use email. I'll use Slack before I'll call someone. So I think between Slack for most, like, what we might call like asynchronous communication. So, you have a question or a thought that you need to share with someone, but you don't need like an immediate response. I think Slack is a great tool for that. So I think the combination of Slack and tools like Zoom, for example, if you need some like FaceTime, or if you need some like synchronous communication, like you need some like real-time decision making and things like that, I think that's like the right pairing. But for me, Slack is one of the first things I check in the morning. It's one of the last things I check before I like sign off, and it's like it's very important.
Awesome. We've got one more question. When building self-directed projects to elevate a portfolio, how would you recommend finding user pain points to start with?
That's a great question. I think, is it Marisa? Marisa?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd love to hear you just explain the question a little bit more, especially the self-directed projects. What do you mean by that?
So in my experience at least in art school, a lot of the projects sometimes are open-ended, and we're kind of tasked with finding a pain point ourselves to build a product on. So with like the deadlines looming, you kind of have to build something really quickly. What's a easy way or a quick way to get you started and find a pain point to address?
That's a great question. Yeah, and so in particular, you're talking about like a product, or like the user experience of someone who's using like software or like a website, something like that.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I love that. So here's years ago, I read this like a book that's like been very influential to me. It's called About Face, and it was written by Alan Cooper. Alan Cooper is, he's one of the founders of like a coding language called Visual Basic. He's someone who like really was like one of the early adopters of like user personas and things like that. And his whole idea, and like one of the core tenets of like About Face, is called goal-oriented design. And so I think the very first thing that you need to do is like define who is it you're designing for, and like what is their goal, like what are they trying to do, right? Because what you see there is like sort of like a line between that person where they start and their goal, right? Like that's their journey. And so if you're looking for like the pain points are generally like the obstacles on the road to that goal that prevent them from getting there. So like, for example, let's say you're like trying to log in to like Gmail or something like that, right? And so like your goal is to like check your messages to see if you got like a message from your friend or something like that. And so like one of the obstacles might be that you don't remember what your password is, or like another obstacle might be like, let's say if you are like someone who is non-sighted, like if you're blind or have like low visibility, let's say like your one of your pain points is that you have to navigate you're navigating that login process using like a screen reader. So you're hearing, instead of seeing the screen, you're hearing it read out to you, right? And so like each one of these things might be a pain point. And so that's how I would find my pain points. And then the good solutions are the ones that like remove those pain points or change the process so that they can kind of avoid them. So hope that answers your question, and I'm happy to talk more about it.
That was helpful. Thank you.
Great.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I feel like this has been like an incredibly robust and awesome conversation. I like I said, I could ask you questions all day long, but you're a busy person. It sounds like solving lots of problems for the world, with the world. And so I guess I think we can wrap up here, and I just want to extend gratitude to you for sharing your time with us, and maybe kind of let you close it out. If there's anyone who's here who maybe wants to reach out to you or get involved with Fearless, are there any things that you have upcoming, any programs that people can participate in, any way to reach out?
Yeah, well, right now we are, if I can make a shameless plug, we're on a bit of a hiring spree right now. And so we're looking for designers of every experience level, of every type. If you're interested in helping the CDC get better about like predicting the next pandemic, or
Oh, wow.
you're-
No light tasks.
yeah. So things like that. So feel free to check out fearless.tech/careers for some of our openings, and you can email me as well. My email is jwatts@fearless.tech. If you have other questions about kind of design or how we practice design, I love talking about design, so always happy to connect.
Very cool. Thank you so much. Again, this has really been wonderful.
Thank you so much.
All right. Yeah. Francis, do we have any AIGA closing remarks?
That is pretty much it, but I'll drop the link to our site again and just remind you all, we have, a couple more events in October, and then we're going to throw a November game night on, a virtual game night on in November, finalizing the date for that, but we'll have that up soon. So yep, Crystal just got it in the chat. And yeah, again, just thank you so much, Jordan. We got to have an event at Fearless right before the pandemic, so it's kind of like we're on the other side now. So
there is a light.
yeah.
All right, awesome. Well, I hope everybody has an amazing day. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you around the way at some of these other events we've got lined up.
Thank you, Jordan.
Great. Well, thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great
Woo.
job.
Yay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jordan.
Yeah,
do you
take a
feel?
breath. Go like eat. You probably need to eat lunch now.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I'm gonna go grab some lunch. But yeah, thank you everybody for thank you Kim and Francis for moderating, and for the thoughtful
Oh my
questions.
gosh. It's been my pleasure, truly.
Yeah.
We
And,
will send we'll send a recording to you in case you
Okay.
guys want that or could
Great,
use that
yeah.
at all.
It'd be fantastic. And I would love to, at some point we should have a conversation about what we plan to do next, because it's always
Cool.
fun to work with y'all. So
Nice. Ditto.
Awesome. Would love that. Yep.
awesome. Great.
Cool. All right. Have a great rest of your day, Jordan.
You too. Bye.
Cool.
Bye.
See ya.